Next physiological reasoning question is lesion in Wernicke's area leads to word deafness. We have to give the physiological reasoning behind the word deafness and its association with the part called as Wernicke's area. So if we have to give or write this answer, we have to write in parts. Like we have to start with what is Wernicke's area. Okay, then we have to write about what is a word deafness, okay, or the meaning behind this word deafness and its association with the Wernicke's area. Then we have to write about some conditions, okay, or situations when this might happen. Okay, so let's start with our answer. So lesion in Wernicke's area can lead to word deafness. That's the fact. Now this happens due to disruption in the brain's ability to assign meaning to incoming speech or sounds, okay, and which leads to impairment of comprehension of spoken languages. Okay, while in this condition the non-speech sound processing is relatively intact. Now that's the beginning line for you. So it means that in this word deafness, what happens, the person having any issue with the word deafness or Wernicke's area, what happens, the person's problem is just in comprehension about the spoken words. Okay, if something is written, he will be able to comprehend or understand. The literal meaning of the word comprehension is to understand or making the process in the brain to understand whatever is being heard. Okay, but relatively non-speech sounds like some sounds, the literal musical sounds or any environmental sounds which is related to some object, those processing is relatively intact in the brain. Okay, next we have to answer what is in Wernicke's area. So this is a pictorial diagram in which the relative position of the brain in the head is given. Okay, so specifically these areas are present in the dominant hemispheres of the brain. Okay, if supposedly you are a right-handed person, so you will have the dominant hemisphere on the left one. If supposedly you're a left-handed person, your dominant hemisphere or the part of the brain will be on the right one. Okay, so it is been shown as the left hemisphere of the brain, so it's a person probably was a right dominated person or right-handed person. Okay, inside this right-handed person you can see, so this lightly shaded area, this is called as the temporal lobe. Okay, we know the general dictum is the temporal lobes helps in hearing. Okay, more specifically, if we look closely in this temporal lobe, it is divided into three broad gyruses. Okay, the elevated areas are called as the gyruses and the depressed areas are called as the sulcus. Okay, sulcus and gyrus. Okay, gyrus. So anyways, let's keep our focus on the superior part. Okay, the superior section or superior gyrus. Now here is the place where this Wernicke's area is there. Okay, so it's also sometimes called as the Brodmann's area 22, based upon the homunculus depiction. So here are the neurons which are related to the Wernicke's area are located. Now this Wernicke's area, if it is closely associated to the temporal gyrus, and this temporal gyrus, the fibers are receiving signals from your ear. Okay, now pay attention to this point. Okay, now the ear receives all the sensory signals that is arriving to the pinna. Okay, the sounds, mechanical sounds are pushing inside. Okay, it will cross the external auditory canal, it will reach the middle ear, then it will reach, by the way, there is the tympanic membrane in between the external auditory canal and the middle ear. Now from the middle ear, through the help of the round window, it will cross the inside, that is called the inner ear. Now inside the inner ear we have the cochlea. Now cochlea houses some functional units of hearing that is called as the organ of Corti, or Corti, whatever you want to say. Now when the sound reaches through and throughout these areas, it will pass through the cochlea. There will be the functional units of hearing, and it will sense the sounds. Okay, the spoken words then goes and travel to your superior colliculi. Okay, nucleus that is present in the midbrain, medulla, or in the brainstem. Then it travels to the Wernicke's area. Okay, now what happens, this Wernicke's area is also called as a sensory speech center. Okay, now this area, that is our Wernicke's area, what it does, it, whenever it receives the signals from through and throughout this area, this from the external auditory canal traveling through the middle and inner ear, reaches the organ of Corti and the superior colliculi, and then it reaches there. If all these pathways are intact, what happens, it comprehends. Okay, comprehends, that is interprets and understands or analyzes the sound based upon his past memories. Okay, of usually the auditory informations. Now if all these pathways are okay, and supposedly the person having the Wernicke's areas are okay, then the person will be able to understand what the spoken word is meaning, and accordingly he will answer it in a nice flow of answers and words. Okay, if supposedly this area is gone, if there is some, due to some reasons, okay, whether it's a degenerative lesion or some accidents which leads to destruction of the nerve fibers that is present in the Wernicke's area, what will happen, it will lead to incomprehension of, or the person won't be able to interpret this words that is being spoken to him. So what will happen, as a result, the person will talk in a fluent, okay, speech, okay, talks excessively, okay, and those talks will be makes little or sometimes no sense, okay. That's usually happens to students when we take viva and the student doesn't know the answer. He tries to speak fluently and excessively in order to show his confidence, but actually he does not know the answer, he or she doesn't know the answer. So as such you can think the person having Wernicke's alienation to be speaking in that kind of a manner, okay, because the person is not being able to understand. So the person is failing to understand the meaning of spoken or written words, okay. So this kind of an aphasia is sometimes been named as sensory, okay, or fluent aphasia. Fluency is maintained, that's why the name fluency has been stuck, and sensory takes the sensory input of auditory sensation or the written sensation, and he tries to understand but he's not being able to interpret the results. So that kind of an aphasia that comes is called as an fluent or sensory aphasia or word deafness. Apart from the name sensory and the fluent aphasia, sometimes the word aphasia is also used. The meaning is the same, okay, whatever name you use, because the word is not being comprehended. So that's why. Now the reasons or the situations where or the conditions where you will get those things, okay, conditions where word deafness usually occurs, okay. So you can write one of those is the any vascular events, for example stroke, okay, and hemorrhagic stroke that causes localized degeneration or loss of neurons in Wernicke's area. Then you can also write as the second point as disconnection syndrome, okay. That means congenitally some people will have disconnection between the Wernicke's area and the associated fibers, which helps in comprehending the signals that is coming from the auditory pathway. The auditory pathway, okay. So next you can write consequences of lesion. What will happen when there is a Wernicke's area lesion? You can write all those events that we discussed as impaired speech comprehension, okay. Patient cannot process or repeat spoken language but retain normal hearing for non-verbal words. Then you can write about the feature of fluent but non meaningful speech. Okay, the sentences structure, sometimes intonation and rhythm remains normal, but the utterance or mere speaking of words lack communicative information, and you will comprehend nothing what the person is speaking to you. Okay, third is the person will still preserve reading or writing skill. Okay, in some cases, usually when there is a vascular event, along with that the Broca's area is also affected. So sometimes this area, this point is also lost, but usually if there is an isolated event and the Wernicke's area is affected, usually the preservation of the reading or writing event is there. So person will be able to read, okay, person will be able to write, okay, and but the literal understanding those words will be not there.